Welcome back to another episode of That's When I Knew the podcast, where real people have real conversations about the journey towards building a meaningful career in the tech sales field. I'm your host, Robert Creighton, and today I have a veteran in the tech sales field joining me on the podcast. He's worked for, as an enterprise account executive for the likes of Salesforce, IBM, AT&T, and more recently Asana. And for the listeners currently listening and that are already working in sales, and if you spend any time on LinkedIn, you've probably seen his posts come through on your feed. His LinkedIn posts come through on your feed. Our guest today, he has over 15 years of sales experience and a wealth of knowledge that he consistently shares with his followers on LinkedIn. And if you're not already, be sure to check him out. You can find him via his socials. They'll be in the episode notes for you to go ahead and follow him. But without further ado, Salman Mohiuddin, welcome to That's When I Knew the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Robert. Really excited to be on your podcast.
Absolutely. Very excited to have you on the show. You're doing a lot of big things, and I really just love how consistent you've been on LinkedIn with sharing content. And it's not just content about how to be a better salesperson, but you also are consistently sharing content that's like real, and so we're going to definitely get into that, because I think you're providing a lot of value to people out there, whether you're interested in embarking on a career in sales, whether you're in sales, you're sharing a lot of value. But I'm personally a believer that our personal lives, our upbringing, our families, they have a huge impact on how we approach building a career. And so I would love to, if we could just start from the beginning, if you could tell me a little bit about yourself and really, start from the beginning, where you grew up and how your upbringing has, made you into the person that you are today.
Happy to, Robert, for sure. And thanks again. Really been following your work and your upbringing as well. You and I have similar beginnings as well, and I'll touch on that now. But so I'm based out of Toronto, Canada right now, which is a large, diverse city. It's actually the fourth largest city in North America population-wise. But I'm originally from Western Canada. There's a province called Alberta, known for its oil and mining and so on. But I was born and raised in a very small town in northern Alberta called Fort McMurray, Alberta, and a very small town. 35,000 people, was born there in the early mid-'80s. Not a very diverse group of people. I was only one of the few colored people in that city. And, my parents had migrated from India to Toronto back in the 70s, and my two older brothers were born in the big diverse city in Toronto, the biggest city in Canada. And then my dad got a job with the oil company back in Alberta, and we moved there, and I was born there. So, grew up where I was the only one of the few colored people, and spent a lot of time there. Didn't know a lot about diversity, didn't know a lot about the real world out there. And it was great. It was great to be involved in that environment. I learned a lot, and it was the first 10 years of my life there. And my parents were separated when I was about 6 years old. And what happened there was my mom was, raising three boys, myself and two older brothers, at a young age. I really looked up to my mom, because it's not like she came with this degree in business where she was making a lot of money. She had to work as a minority in a small town for minimum wage, working at bakery stores, working at pizza stores, making pizzas, and taking care of three boys, and us just kind of not knowing the full context of what she was doing. So I'm very appreciative to my mom and my stepdad as well, who she got married to after a few years. And, then we decided to move to the bigger city. It was either between Vancouver and Toronto. They chose Toronto. I was 10 years old at the time. I didn't have much of a say in where we were going, but then came to Toronto and been here since for the last 27, 28 years. And that's kind of a bit about me in terms of the way I grew up.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And big shout out to moms, holding it down, three boys, and, just phenomenal. And, I similar story. Although I'm my mom's only child, single mother. And so, I saw the struggles with just her having me. So I can only imagine having three boys. And it seemed like she just had a crazy work ethic and was going to do whatever it took to, make sure that, her boys were able to have a good life. I'm curious. So, you talked about how in the town you grew up in, there was not much diversity. You were kind of like the only person, that looked like you. Do you think that had any impact on like just how like early on how you went about networking with people and just you know being yourself? Because and I want to touch on this because one of your LinkedIn posts, I don't want to skip ahead too much, but one of your LinkedIn posts, you talked about how you always stay true to yourself when you're working in corporate America. And I can imagine being a young kid in an area where it's not really diverse, it can be easy to want to fit in. So, did you always have that mindset of like, I'm not trying to fit in, I'm going to always be me? Or did you kind of have to bump your head a little bit, growing up as a kid to learn that, it's not really the best idea to fit in. I'm going to always stay true to myself.
Yeah, it's a great question, Robert. And, at that age, the first 10 years of my life, living in that type of small town, I didn't have the wisdom that I have today that I could share. But back then, like, there were a few families that were of South Asian descent, of my color, and we got together, we used to hang out. And unfortunately, there was, a level of racism in that city towards colored people, and it was unfortunate, but that's just part of the real world that we lived in, especially back in the mid-late 80s. And I saw that with my eyes, and there were some tense moments between a few families on my side, a few family friends on my side, with other folks as well. But I was I was the person that kind of sat back and saw the situation and just said that unfortunately this exists. And as I grew older and coming to Toronto, seeing the diverse amount of people, like if you look at Toronto, it's like a mini New York. It's so diverse. You could jump on a bus and you hear like 20 different languages being spoken. It's crazy. It's amazing. And I felt more like, hey, this is what the world's all about. It's about diversity. It's about respecting people. It's about treating others with the same level of respect that you would want to be treated with. And, that opened my eyes to kind of, ensuring that I developed those values that my faith teach me, that my parents taught me, that my mom taught me, in terms of treat everyone with respect, no matter what color your skin is, where you're from, what language you speak. And number two is, whatever you do it with 100% effort in everything that you do, and be patient and be resilient, because my faith teaches me that you're going to go through peaks and you're going to go through valleys, and how you build yourself as an individual is how you deal with those things when you're in those valleys. Are you patient and you stay true to yourself? And I'm a big believer that lastly is, after every difficulty comes ease. Right? After every difficulty, there's going to be peaks and valleys, but the way you go through it, you're going to see light at the end of the tunnel. All
right. So listeners, watchers, this is why you need to follow. This is why you need to follow this guy. He's just full of inspiration. I feel like, if I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, I'm definitely not on the wrong side of the bed anymore. But no, I love it. I'm a faith person as well. I would actually love to talk about that. Like, in corporate America, it's for the most part, it's about productivity. It's about efficiency. It's about making money. That's the goal of, economics in corporate America. And, how's your faith kind of, how have you used that to, I guess, let me take a step back. How has your faith impacted, your approach towards just building a career, generally speaking?
That's a great point. Yeah, I look at my faith as a foundation of who I am. And for me, faith and family are kind of toe and toe together. And that really dictates the way you approach your life, the way you approach your family, the way you approach your daily life and your work. And for me, it's the foundation. Without my faith and my family, then what am I really doing with my life? What am I doing? What am I trying to accomplish in my life? And there's 3 or 4 things that my faith teaches me that allows me to approach, to your point, Robert, how I approach my sales career, how I approach corporate America or North America, since I'm in Canada. But number one is making sure that you do everything to the best of your ability, right? My faith teaches me that whatever you're doing, it could be, doing a small task at home or doing a big task at work, putting in 100% of your effort in. That's number one. That's important. Number 2 is, being resilient and patient in tough times. We go through tough times. Everybody does, whether it's a family, whether it's financial, whether it's mentally, whether it's at work. We all have good days. We all have bad days. And that happens. That's just a part of life. My faith teaches me that, during the bad times, are you still patient? Are you still a person that has even keel and stays strong mentally? Can you get through it? And, and my faith teaches me that, you're promised that after every difficulty, you're going to have some ease. It's just going to happen. And I've seen it with my own eyes, Robert. I really have in my life where I was going through a tough situation and I was patient. And we're all human. We all worry about things, obviously. If you lose something, if you lost your job, if you're going through a tough time, we're human. We worry about it. But are we patient? Do we believe that there's light at the end of the tunnel? And there's been several examples where that's happened and things have worked out. And it's because you're patient. So those are kind of the things I build on to make sure that my life is made easier in the work world.
No, I love it because you make a good point because, especially when you talk about when you talk about a sales career, you could be on the top of the leaderboard one day and on the PIP the next. And there's so many factors that can, and a PIP is a performance improvement plan for the folks that aren't in sales. And, there's a lot of factors, involved with building a career in sales. Obviously you have your own personal skills, your business acumen, and just how good of a seller you are. But, no matter how good of a seller you are, if you're new in your career, you're working for a company that maybe doesn't have product market fit. Maybe you're working for a manager who's never managed a team before, so you don't have that support. That is going to affect your chances of being successful. And, these are what we call dips, right? There's valleys and peaks in our career. And, Salman, what I really appreciate about what you're saying is like having a faith, right? Having faith, just that trust that things will be all right is so critical because, there's going to be ups and downs, in life, but also even in your professional career. I've had them. It sounds like you've had them. And I would love to hear a story, later on in the show. But what you're saying is just spot on. And so I'm curious because I know a bit about Canada. I've been to Vancouver once, on a work trip. Beautiful city. It was like one of the cleanest cities I've ever been in, especially coming from San Francisco where, parts of San Francisco, it's just like, but anyway, Vancouver, just the cleanest city. The air was fresh. I loved it out there. Toronto, I know that's where Drake is from. I know that's where the Toronto Raptors, upset the Warriors. We were going to go on a three-peat. That's a story for another day. But from a professional standpoint, I'm curious, like early on in your career, and also as you're like late teens, let's say the 90s, early 2000s, what were the careers that you were even exposed to growing up, and like what were the expectations of you from like your family as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think this will resonate with you as well because I heard about your first job. So we'll touch on that in a second. But being from a South Asian family, traditionally our culture from back home, we put a lot of emphasis on a career. And this is a stupid bias, but it's kind of like, back home, some of the strict people kind of say, hey, if you're not a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer, you're not successful in life. I'm like, and I was talking to my mom about this at a young age. I'm like, seriously, Mom, do I really need to be one of these? Like, what if I don't? What if I become like an NBA player? I actually wanted to be an NBA player. So long story short, I played basketball a lot, and in high school, I had aspirations for
Okay.
being an NBA player. I was about 6'3", had a growth spurt. I was a bench player, but I actually got better in university. I was actually able to slam dunk in my first year of university, and
Oh, nice.
but then I realized this is way too much competition. There's no way I can make the NBA. But to your point, I actually started off selling newspaper subscriptions, just like yourself, Robert, in Oakland. Like I did that,
Wow.
and we talked about this a little bit before. I had this guy pick my brother up and I in his van, drop us off somewhere north in the city, and he said, "This is a street you sell Toronto Star newspaper subscriptions, sell them on a 3-month subscription," and I'm telling you, that instilled a lot of. This was when I was like 14, 15 years old. So, I got some extra cash, which I needed for high school. I was supporting my family a little bit as well. And it taught me a lot about sales in general because it wasn't easy. You can attest to this, Robert.
Oh, yeah.
I got doors slammed in my face. I got every name in the book called at me. I got threats. There was this one time where I was like 14 and I got dropped on the street. And usually the person, our manager, picks us up at the end of the street. And I was waiting there for like an hour. And I was like, where's my manager? I don't even know where I am. How am I going to get home? I had tears in my eyes, Robert.
Oh,
And
snap.
I had to go to someone's house and random house saying, I know I just knocked on your door and you didn't buy any newspaper subscriptions, but I need a ride home. Like, I could tell you my address. And as I got in this car, I saw my manager drive by and I ran out and it was going like this, I'm right here. And my brother was in the car and he's like, man, we thought we lost you. I don't know what happened. You got kidnapped or something. But, I from that and I really wanted to get into sales. I wanted to work with people. I wanted to bring value to people because I knew that you need to have thick skin in sales because people are going to say no to you, and that inspired me to do more for sure in the sales space.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, definitely remember my days early on. I was around the same age, and I wanted money. I mean, like I was very much, wanted all the cool stuff, right? Wanted to have the sidekick, wanted to have the cool Jordans or whatever came out. And, also single mom, she couldn't afford these things. And so I got my first job, very similar story. And yeah, but I have a lot of crazy stories that I can share about that experience. Um, but yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. So it sounds like you were able to get that experience and were able to test the waters and get an idea of what sales was all about very early on. Um, so going into college, did you know that you were still going to pursue sales even after graduating, or was it one of those things where it's like, yeah, I did that, but I'm actually interested in this over here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So leading up to high school and university, I had a lot of part-time jobs. So I was able to balance high school and university with part-time sales jobs, and I did fundraising for charities for a few years. So just calling on random people asking for money. I worked for AT&T call center selling long distance plans, and I'm proud to say in each of these roles, I was a top performer. Like I just had that
Yes.
knack
Hey.
for being able to talk to people, connect with people, convince them to buy something. And it's not easy when you talk to random people. Like nobody wants to get a phone call during dinner, but I was able to do that. And I'm telling you, I was part-time. I was working alongside folks that have been doing this for years, and I stepped in and I made an impact. And I was a top performer. And I'm like, if I can do it at this level, then why can't I look at sales as a career? Because I know that tech sales was booming at that time. I know that you can make some decent money. I know you could grow that career. And I didn't let, my faith or the color of my skin hold me back because I knew I could do it. So I was able to balance my school career with sales jobs and kind of move towards that direction.
Awesome, awesome. For someone being that you've seen it all and you've had such a great career in sales so far, for someone that knows nothing about sales, but they're not satisfied with what they're currently doing in life and are interested in maybe a career change, what would you say are the intangible skills, or just the skills that if they have this, they should feel excited about this career and say, hey, this is actually something that maybe I should pursue? What are those maybe 2 skills that, someone should, if they possess those skills, they'd be make a good seller without even knowing anything about the sales career?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Robert. And I want to bring in a couple of stories too, because I've had individuals over the last few years reach out to me directly, people that I know and people that I don't know, kind of ask, hey, listen, I want to shift my career to tech sales. What should I look out for? What should I do? And I have a very transparent conversation with them, Robert, because you know this, you're in tech sales, you know how it works. It's not for everyone. It really isn't. And I tell them you need to have 3 or 4 things. If you have these, I recommend it. If you don't, then maybe it's a not right fit for you. One is you need to be able to handle pressure, because in tech sales, you're going to have quotas that you need to hit. Sometimes there's so much change happening. You don't know who your manager is going to be one day and the next. And there's a lot of pressure to close monthly business and quarterly business. And there's a lot of eyes on you because you're the revenue generator for the company. So you're going to get a lot of pressure to close business. And if you don't, you might have a short career within that role or within that company. So number 1, can you handle the pressure? Number 2 is that, can you handle change? There's a lot of companies, tech companies, that get acquired or, change their business model. Your model could change, your manager can change in an instant. So if you're not used to change and you can't handle it, then it's not for you. And number 3 is the compensation can fluctuate, right? It's not like you're going to, have every year you're going to be hitting your number and you're going to be making several hundred K per year. It just doesn't work that day. Wait, you're going to have good years and you're going to have bad years. And sometimes if you make it, like, for example, I'll give you a story. When I was thinking about sales and, I had closed a big deal and got a big commission check, I was like, okay, I'm going to buy this property. I bought my first house. And for some people, that's great. But then you got to look at it. Okay, can you still handle this expense the following year? What if you don't close that big deal and you're just relying on your base salary? That could be a concern. So those are the 3 things I give them, and then let them make that decision, because it is a risk to change your career. It can be very rewarding, or there can be a lot of risk with it as well.
Yeah, and that's real. That's real. Okay, you're 15 years in, either from your own self or just from your peers and colleagues that are also in the tech sales field. What's the biggest commission check you've either had or someone that's gotten like this big check? What's the biggest commission check you've heard about?
I'm not going to talk about mine personally, but it was pretty decent. Yeah. I still have a goal to get a bigger one.
Okay.
It was in the 6 figures, obviously, but
okay.
I've heard of people getting 7-figure commission checks, and
wow,
it's crazy, but it takes time to get there. And that's to your question, Robert. You said, hey, it takes time. You start off as an SDR. You go to, if you're successful, you can be SMB, AE, mid-market, and then you go to strat enterprise. It took me a while to get the enterprise space, but you're going to have deals in your career where you can be proud of and say, hey, I closed that massive, 7-figure, 8-figure deal. And because of that, I got a massive commission check. So I've heard of people getting 7-figure commission checks. It's real. It can happen, but it takes patience. It takes a process. Yeah. And, that's one of my goals as well, to do that in the very, very near future.
No, definitely. And so, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to break down for the listeners that, again, maybe they're not in tech sales, maybe they're interested in this field. Typically, when you're jumping into sales, if you have no corporate experience, you're likely going to start off as an SDR, sales development representative, business development representative. Depending on where you live, those people can make, I'll say 60 to 120K altogether. So and this is annually, and usually half to 30% of your pay is going to be variable. So it's going to depend on if you're hitting your targets. And then from there, you're going up to the AE role, where usually, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Salman, but usually you start off dealing with the smaller companies. So you're selling smaller deals. And then as you get more experience, you're going up to bigger segments. So then you have what's called mid-market. Usually these are companies, 100 to 1,000 people. They're maybe popular companies, but they're not like the Facebooks of the world. They're not like the Googles. These we call those the enterprise. So for me, I'm curious. Now's your turn to give me advice specifically. I'm gonna put you on the spot because I need some help. I'm right now. I'm dealing with, I'll say the mid market. My current company, we don't actually even have segments, so I can deal with any company that comes in. But based our product, we're usually selling to companies, less than 5,000 employees. So when you think about giving an advice to someone who's at that mid market level, and the next step for them, or what their desires, that enterprise level, what should they be thinking about as they prepare to make that jump?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's a few things that you need to consider. One is that you need to have a process in place that's proven, that works for you. And what I mean by that is that you can go through the cycles and close your deals and prospect into accounts. But if you don't have a process in place to help you do that, then it's going to be difficult to prove that out. Because for salespeople, there's a couple of avenues that you want to go through. Let's say you're an account executive in the SMB space and you want to go to mid-market or mid-market to enterprise. You can either ride it out with your current company, hit your numbers, prove that you're a valuable person and get promoted, or you can look at external organizations that may give you that opportunity as well. And what I tell other AEs that have 3 to 5 years experience in that range to go up is that you need to have a personal brand where people will look at you internally within your organization and say, hey, Robert's a good candidate for this role because he has a specific process that he uses. He has a specific playbook that he uses that's able to differentiate himself. We should promote him. Or you prove to an external organization through the interview process that, hey, I have a playbook that I use that's been successful. Let me tell you how you do it. And what I mean by playbook is that you have a specific process for prospecting. I have a 3-step process that I use personally that I share with others that's helped me differentiate myself from others. I have a process for my playbook to build a point of view and share that with executives. And I know how to also mitigate risk. Every deal has risk. What are you doing in your cycle to mitigate risk? Are you engaging with executives? Are you understanding all the key stakeholders? Are you understanding who the key decision maker is and how their budgeting process works? So if you have a process in place and you've documented it and you can build that into your own process and playbook, and you share that with your internal team, you share that with potentially external people on how that process is, then it'll help you build your brand and move up in your career.
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. That's some really good insight there. Would you say that also, especially with these bigger deals, if we're talking about moving from one company to another, does it make it easier if you have domain expertise, maybe even have connections in that space? Is that something that employers look at? Like, hey, do you need to say, hey, I actually went golfing with the executives of the Fortune 500 companies. They're my buddies. Does that make it easier, or is it, in your opinion, do companies not really? Is that something that is not really realistic that they're expecting?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that they look for. To your point, Robert, they definitely. It's a big plus if you have relationships. I'll give you one example. One of the large tech companies that I worked for quite recently, they were hiring specifically for an individual that had experience with a specific bank. So we want to find somebody externally that has relationships with this bank because we believe that there's a large potential for a deal there. So their specific goal was to find someone that had relationships there. And when you look at the enterprise space, if there's a role where you'd be covering 2 or 3 accounts, yes, having relationships is important. I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker, but it's a key qualifier. Number 2 is they look for experience. Does this individual have experience in this industry? Do they have tech sales experience where they can showcase, hey, I've closed a deal here and here with a couple of your key competitors. I think I can bring value. If they have that domain expertise, if they have that industry expertise, that brings value as well. And then also a level of confidence and a point of view. You're going to hear me using the word point of view. And what that point of view means is that, do you have a point of view that you can share with an executive, right? One of the things that I do in every sales meeting with an executive, if I'm meeting with, let's say, Robert, you're an executive for a big bank in the U.S., and I got a meeting with you through my prospecting techniques, or maybe my SDR is amazing, and she was able to book a meeting with you. I'm not going to bring my shiny toy and show you, hey, here's a great product that we're selling. This is how we're different. No. I'm going to bring a point of view, and I'm going to say, hey, Robert, your CEO said their priority is this. How does your objective and your team support that initiative? Tell me about that. So if you bring your point of view and understand the objectives of the person that you're talking to and their priorities, and make it less about you and your product, you're going to build credibility up front. I guarantee you they're going to look at you and say, wow, this guy really cares about my business. That makes a difference.
Wow, you make that sound so easy. Like, and it is like a lot of in my opinion, what makes someone a successful seller is their ability to ask, right, and just be upfront and put it all on the table, right. And so I love that you do your research and you ask, hey, how does this align with your goals, and how can we link the two? I love that. I have some sales calls later on today. I'm gonna use that one for sure. But I want to switch gears just a tad bit, because how I came across you was on LinkedIn. One of your posts came through my feed, and I just love the post because it resonated with me because being an African American male, I think, how many times have there been another African American on my sales team? I could probably count on half a hand. So I've definitely experienced firsthand working in sales organizations where the culture just doesn't align with my culture and where I come from. When you're raised in the inner city, when your family isn't involved in this industry, where all of this is new to you, it's all an experience, and really all you want to do is put your best foot forward, and you're actually kind of grateful to even be in this industry, and then you come across a culture where it's like all that's taken for granted, and it's just a game, and it's not treated professionally. The sales career isn't a professional career. It's like, hey, I'm just doing this because I wasn't smart enough to go this other route that, my other, you know what I mean? Like I've seen this culture, and it can be a little frustrating sometimes when, or not frustrating, but you just get in that headspace where you're like, I'm gonna stay true to myself, and I'm gonna keep my eyes open, and I'm just aware of what's going on around me. And so went in a little bit of a rabbit hole, but you made a post talking about how you don't drink alcohol, and for the listeners out there, a lot of people drink, and like a lot of social networking, there's alcohol. There's things, and it goes beyond just the alcohol. There's things sometimes salespeople feel like they have to do in order to get the trust and appreciation of their peers, get the trust and appreciation of their managers, get the trust and appreciation of their customers. And so I loved how in your post you basically acknowledged that, hey, I don't do this, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm still going to be successful. So can you talk a little bit about what inspired you to make that post in particular, and then I want to transition into like your journey into I'm going to call you an influencer, your journey to becoming a LinkedIn influencer. Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm a LinkedIn influencer right now yet, but I just
right.
So Robert, just so you know, and all the listeners, I just started posting 3 weeks ago. That's it, like literally. I wasn't posting much before that at all, and you can look at my LinkedIn profile. You can follow me, Salman Mohiuddin on LinkedIn.
This is true, but let me say one thing. I don't mean to interrupt you, but for the listeners and viewers, what he's saying is that Robert, myself, I have an eye for talent. So,
yes.
So watch out. He's just started, but watch out. If you're listening to this podcast 6 months from now and you go to his LinkedIn, he's going to have like 30,000 followers, and you're going to be like, "Wow, Robert is I should start a LinkedIn record label and sign LinkedIn artists. That should be a thing." Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, totally. Yeah, but yeah, you got a knack for talent for sure. So thank you, Robert, for reaching out to me literally 2 weeks into my posting. Like I was like, wow, am I that popular? But no, in all seriousness, I just started 3 weeks ago, and I'm humbled to know that my posts are resonating with people, whether they be early in their sales careers, whether they be SDRs, AEs, minorities. And you're right, the posts that I put together had a lot of engagement about not drinking. And, I'm an open book. I don't drink because I'm a person of faith. I'm a Muslim. I don't drink. And, that doesn't take away from what I do. And I've been in this industry for 15 years where I've been with people that drink. That's totally fine. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, you drink, you're not good. Like, my colleagues drink. That's awesome. I'll hang out with them, but I won't drink. And, the majority of people, most people, they understand that. And I'll be an open book. But, I think that early on in my sales career, as I got into sales, I didn't understand that the level of culture that was involved in drinking where, for an outsider looking in, you're like, well, drinking is part of the culture. Like, how are you going to close deals by not going out to the bar and relaxing with the customer over a cold one? And, I've been able to stay true to myself and stay true to my faith by not drinking one sip of alcohol for my entire life, and especially in sales. And, I tell you this with all honesty, Robert, when I posted that, a lot of folks that reached out to me and engaged on my post by leaving comments saying that we appreciate you writing this because there's a lot of, like, I don't drink as well. And, I've been able to be successful. I had another individual who said he started a new job at Facebook and he's actually moving to Texas to work out of their Austin office. And he was asking me for tips. How should I, work? I said, listen, there's nothing wrong with hanging out with people with your colleagues that may have a drink, but stay true to yourself. Nothing should stop you from being successful if you're drinking. It doesn't mean that you can't, you don't need to have a drink to have a meaningful conversation with a customer, to talk about their priorities, to talk about their challenges. Like, it hasn't stopped me from closing deals. Why should it stop you? And in fact, what I found is that the majority of people, they really open up. I sat down with an executive a few years ago, and he was having a drink. I was having a glass of Coke. Actually, I prefer root beer, by the way. It's just spelled it out there. Nice, Barks root beer. And, I was honest with him. I said, hey, I don't drink because of my faith. And we started talking about faith. We started talking about culture. He opened up about some of, his thoughts on life and all that. And it was actually a great conversation. I ended up closing that deal. Maybe it was because of that conversation. I don't know. But what my message is to everyone, if you don't drink, that's totally fine. And it's not going to stop you from being successful in sales. If you think sales is all about drinking, it's not. It's about building connections with people.
Building connections with people. That's real. And, I love the post, and I look at the post almost as like a metaphor or figurative language. Like, it's so much deeper than the fact that you don't drink. It's a matter of being authentic to yourself, being your true self, right? And being you. And I think there's a shift happening in corporate America where that's actually being more acceptable. It's being accepted more, right? And people buy from people, right? And so, yeah, you want to build rapport, and having some commonalities with people that might put you on a good path forward. But people also like to work with interesting people. People like to learn from people. People like to be inspired by people. So, for me personally, from this point forward, or actually I would say from the last year forward, how I approached my careers, I will lose a deal because I was being myself. I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay with losing a deal because, I say a word a certain type of way, or, I'm just myself. If I lose a deal because of that, that's fine. But I'm not going to, all the money in the world won't make you feel good about yourself if you're just, you're acting, and I also want to hold space and acknowledge, because for a lot of people, there is this idea of imposter syndrome. And for a lot of people, they're not themselves because they don't feel like they can be themselves and succeed. And I think you're a great case of that's not true. I think I'm a great case of that's not true. You touched on it early on in the show, like in regards to what skills are necessary to do the job. And, there wasn't one point where you mentioned you need to be this person, right? And so yeah, I'm so glad you made that post. It's real. I think it should get, more likes. So people should definitely go check out that post. And that's actually a good transition into where you are now in your career. We touched on it a bit. You're 3 weeks in, 3 weeks into the LinkedIn. You post every day. I'm like, what's next? And I love the post. So yeah, can you talk about what inspired you to say, hey, I want to challenge myself to post on LinkedIn every day, and then just what the experience has been like for you?
Yeah, it's a great point. So what really inspired me was following people that post regularly. So there's a few folks that I follow that are sales influencers, and that one thing promoted me, inspired me. But there's another thing that did, and this is actually a personal story. I had an SDR call me about a month and a half ago. And I'm not in management, right? I don't get SDRs from to call me, and this individual called me on a mobile phone. And I was like, wow, I'm flattered. This is awesome. SDR is calling me at the company I'm working for right now. I don't know, I'll take the call. I'll listen. And unfortunately, it wasn't a good call. So that person thought I still had worked at Salesforce. They were proposing their solution. It was all about them. But I didn't hang up on the individual. I didn't demean them. I actually took time out of my day, and I said, hey, SDR, do you mind if I just share some feedback on your call? And this person said, yeah, feel free. So I basically said, hey, if you're approaching me, you should first, number one, do a little bit of research on LinkedIn. I actually work for a company called Asana. I don't work for Salesforce anymore. So that's number one. Understand who I am. Number two is make it more about me and my company, not about how great your company is. So maybe you do some research about, how our results in Q2 were amazing. Talk about something our CEO said about the future of work. And number three, maybe talk about some of our key competitors are leveraging your platform today, and put that together in a message, whether it's an email or on this phone call. That'll make more meaningful. And he basically said, Salman, thank you so much for that feedback. I'm actually going to, take that into account for my next call and implement that. So I posted about this experience, and this was my first post about a month ago. You can look it up. And I had so much engagement on that post. People were like, wow, you took time out of your day to coach an SDR. And the next post I had was that, LinkedIn family, I'm coming for you. This is, you've inspired me. Maybe I'm underestimating my value. I have 15 years of experience at some of the top companies in the world. I think I have a story to share. I have a story to share based on my experience, being a minority, being successful in the space. Let me share my thoughts. And that's what sparked it for the last 3 weeks. And there's been great engagement. And people like yourself, Robert, are being engaging. I appreciate that. And I'll continue to post every day. I'm doing it 5 days a week. We'll see how long it lasts. But hopefully I can keep it up with other folks.
That's all it work. Well, hey, you're going to have some content from this podcast to share too. So maybe that'll help. But yeah, it's tough being consistent on LinkedIn, but I think that's also that's the modern day sales too, though. I think there's some game in there for the sales folks, is building that brand on LinkedIn. I mean, you touched on it earlier, building a brand internally, but if you can build a brand externally, that's just going to just open up so many opportunities for you. So that's awesome. Let me see here. There was a couple kind of just things that I wanted to touch on, and then I want to go into a game that we're going to play. We're not really a game, but I just want to get your first impression on a few words. Let's see here. So I actually I want to get your thoughts on this, because this has come up on LinkedIn quite a bit. Who has the harder job, SDRs or account executives?
That's a great question. Who has a tougher?
And I'm going to answer it too after you.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
I'm going to say SDRs. I'm going to say SDRs because I've been an SDR. I've dealt with SDRs, and I'm an AE as well. I'll give you 3 reasons why I think an SDR has a tougher job than an AE. Number one is it's their first role in sales. It's their first role in sales, and they don't have the experience to kind of back them up. Usually SDRs are hired by top companies within their first year or two of being in the corporate world. So you're basically putting them into the wild. Say, hey, book these meetings ASAP with executives, and their hands are strapped. So that's number one. Number two is they have to work with AEs that have different personalities. I'm sure from your experience, you've worked with AEs that may have some egos. They may have different personalities. They may not see value in SDRs and they won't mentor them. So you feel like as an SDR, the whole world's against you and you got a quota to hit. And that can be difficult because an enterprise AE may not listen to you given that you're kind of a newbie, right? And number three, it's do or die for your quota, because what are the options for an SDR if they're successful or not successful? They either move up to an AE role, maybe an SDR management role, or they rethink if sales is actually the right career for them. So imagine an SDR that doesn't hit their number for the next few months. They're probably thinking, do I need to change careers? Maybe sales not right for me. Versus an AE who has established themselves already. So I think the SDR role is tougher for those reasons.
Okay, now those are good reasons. You might have changed my mind. I see these arguments on LinkedIn, and the reason I wanted to bring it up because I think they're like the arguments on LinkedIn are usually simplified, and I've been an SDR, and I get it. We have to sympathy for this role because an SDR is so crucial to the success of an AE. If you don't have an SDR booking meetings for you, then it's going to be hard for you to hit your number as an account executive. So, I want to start, I definitely appreciate my SDRs. All the SDRs out there that work for me, I think they know that. I love y'all. Thank y'all so much. But I think on LinkedIn, they oversimplify it because what is hard? I think that, being an SDR is a lot of work and it's a grind. You're trying to book a meeting with someone cold usually, and they don't even know about your company. And that is just a lot of work. Usually being an SDR, a lot of companies will have them make, 100 calls a week, if not more, cold calls. You're calling people up. They're not expecting your call. You're sending emails, you're prospecting. So it's a grind for sure. But I think, once you get into that AE role, it's less of that demanding work, but it's more, I would say it's a bit more cerebral. Like you have to, and also it's going to depend on what you're selling too. Like if you're selling a complex solution and you're having to deal with many different stakeholders, and it's just different. I think both jobs are hard, but I'm glad I'm asking you that question though, because that context that you added is actually very helpful, and I think it's good to know for the listeners. So without further ado, let's get into the best part of the show. How this is going to work, this is kind of like a rapid fire game where I'm just going to say a word or maybe a phrase or something, and you have like 2 seconds. So you need to tell me the first word that comes to mind.
Okay, I'm not good at this, but I'll try my best.
You got this. All right, are you ready? All right, so the first word is sales.
It's a grind.
Okay. Tech.
Innovation.
Toronto.
Drake.
Drake?
I don't know.
We got to tag Drake on this. He's going to be like, hey, okay, 6 God. All right, SDR.
Oh, my God. Tough role.
Yeah. Unicorn.
Oh, my God. Going public. I don't know.
Going public. All right. $1 billion. For the listeners out there, yeah. Unicorn is a nickname for companies that reach that $1 billion evaluation status. All right. Mentorship.
Necessary.
DocuSign.
E-signature.
When I think of DocuSign, I think of money.
Yes.
Anytime I look at my email and a DocuSign comes through, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
yes,
we got it.
Sometimes this is a DocuSign comes in, it's actually from like the company DocuSign. They're like, buy our new product. I'm like, this is wow. Got my hopes up. All right, quota.
The quota, pressure.
Commission.
Cha-ching.
Cha-ching. I wish I had a soundboard to make that the sound effect. All right. Lastly, we have personal brand.
Internal, external, both important.
Awesome. Well, that's it. That's it for the podcast. Wow. I really appreciate you, joining the show and sharing your story, but also sharing your experience, your insight, your wisdom with myself for the folks that'll be listening to the podcast. It's greatly appreciated. I'm a big fan early on. I can't wait. I look forward to just seeing your continued consistency and growth as a person. I'll say as a leader in the sales space, right? We need more people like you that are just open, giving back, and are representing for a group of people that we don't see as much in the industry. And so thanks again for joining. That's when I knew.
Thanks a lot, Robert. Appreciate your time. And for all the listeners, thank you for listening. Follow me on LinkedIn. Robert, let's stay in touch. Really appreciate all the work that you're doing for the sales community and careers in general.
Awesome. Yeah, and your LinkedIn will definitely be in the show notes again. So go ahead and click that link, follow them, engage with them on the post. Let's have a conversation on one of the next posts, listeners. But yeah, thanks again, and until next time.
I remember when the vision wasn't as clear. I don't think they thought that I would make it, but motherfuck they thoughts, cause I'm here. Now we here for the taking, yeah. My God.